Ever get that feeling? You're at a party, someone's going on about something they're really into, and it's scarred like magic tricks, right?
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
You're trying to be polite, but in your head you're like, okay, cool story. But what if I told you that sometimes hidden in those kind of unexpected places, there are these absolute gems of life advice?
Oh, I like where you're going with this. You never know where inspiration might come from.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We've got this story, an amateur magician, and the surprising stuff you can learn from what he went through.
All right, lay it on me. What kind of story are we talking about?
So it's this great piece by Mark Stewart Farrar. He actually calls himself an introvert.
An introvert magician. Now that's intriguing.
Right. He dabbles in magic. And get this, he actually won a close-up magic competition.
Wow, okay. Color me impressed. Winning, no matter what it's in, takes a certain something. What was his secret sauce?
Well, that's the thing. It's not so much the winning itself, but how he talks about the whole experience. Like, he even mentions being super hesitant to perform at first. He actually says, I see the irony there, given that magic is a performing art.
Uh-huh, I get that. It's like the classic case of someone terrified of public speaking who joins Toastmasters, except with card tricks instead of speeches.
Totally. But the point is, he acknowledged that fear, that internal barrier we build, that comfort zone, and then he chose to break through it.
Which is easier said than done, by the way. Our brains love familiarity, safety. It takes conscious effort to step outside of that.
Oh, absolutely. And he's very upfront about that, saying doing things you find uncomfortable is how you learn and grow. But he goes further, it's not just facing the fear, but the work you put in because of it. That's where the real growth happens.
It's that because that makes all the difference. Anyone can do something scary once.
Yeah.
Building a skill, changing your mindset. That's commitment.
Exactly. And Mark, he illustrates this beautifully. He talks about practicing by the pool, just muttering to himself. He called it rehearsing his patter.
Okay, I can picture that. Probably got some strange looks from people passing by.
Oh, for sure. But that's dedication, right? And it got me thinking, how often do we, downplay the sheer effort behind someone's accomplishment? And this wasn't some casual thing either. He mentions the competition had amateurs and seasoned pros.
Whoa, okay, now the stakes are higher. Suddenly, it's not just about proving something to yourself, but measuring up against people who've been doing this for years.
And he won.
Yeah.
But honestly, what I found most fascinating were the takeaways he outlined. It stopped being about magic at that point and became this insightful look at comfort zones, what competence really means, how to handle those pre-performance jitters.
Now, those are struggles anyone can relate to. You don't have to be a magician to appreciate that.
Right. And he breaks it down so well. Simple, yet, profound. So, ready to unpack some of these nuggets of wisdom.
Lead the way. I'm all ears.
Okay, so first up, he digs into comfort zones. But it's not just the whole push your boundaries thing, even though he definitely touches on that. He talked about how joining that magic club wasn't just about the tricks. It was about what he learned about himself just by sticking with it, you know?
Right. It's one thing to say, get comfortable being uncomfortable, but it hits different when you see it play out in a real situation.
Totally. Think about it any time you try something new. New job, new city, even a new hobby.
Yeah.
At first, it's all kind of scary and awkward.
Oh, absolutely. Those first few salsa classes, I tell you.
Haha, exactly. But then something shifts, and suddenly you're doing things you never thought you could because you push past that initial discomfort. And that actually ties into his next takeaway, which is competence.
Okay, how does he define competence?
Well, he kind of flips the script on its head. He challenges this idea that being an expert is all about having some fancy title or degree. He's saying real competence, true mastery, it comes from somewhere else.
Which is such a relevant conversation, especially these days. Look around, you've got people building empires from side hustles, becoming thought leaders in their fields without the traditional credentials. Passion and dedication can be way more powerful.
It's like that moment in the article, Mark's showing his act to this seasoned magician, someone who'd won national competitions. And the guy just nods at him and says, well done. No notes, no critiques, just pure acknowledgement.
There's something about that kind of validation, especially coming from someone who's made it. It's like a silent confirmation that you're on the right track.
For sure. And you know what else is interesting? His take on nerves.
Oh, tell me he doesn't buy into that whole picture the audience naked thing.
No way. He actually says that getting nervous can be a good sign, a sign that you actually care about what you're doing.
Isn't it funny how our minds and bodies react the same way to fear as they do to excitement? Increased heart rate, those butterflies. It's all the same physiological response. It's just about how we choose to interpret it.
So it's like, instead of letting those nerves paralyze you, you got to learn to harness them, use that energy to your advantage.
Exactly. Shift your perspective. Think of it as anticipation instead of anxiety. Athletes do this all the time, use those pregame jitters to power their performance. Now, speaking of performance, I'm willing to bet his next takeaway has something to do with practice.
You know it. Mark is all about putting in the work. But he adds this really important caveat: find a way to enjoy the process. Because slogging through something you hate, that's not going to last.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, let's face it, mastery takes time, years even.
Yeah.
If you're not having fun along the way, you're going to burn out before you even get close.
He actually admits that there was a point where he almost quit magic altogether.
Really? What happened?
He was getting frustrated, not seeing the results he wanted. But then he has this aha moment, realized he had to find a way to make the practice itself enjoyable. He had to want to show up, even when it was tough.
That, my friend, is resilience. And it's a skill that transcends magic. You know, life is going to throw curveballs. It's inevitable. The ones who succeed, they're not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who know how to bounce back.
It's like you don't get those rock-hard abs by just thinking about it, right? You got to put in the reps, feel the burn. But once you start seeing those results, there's this satisfaction in the process itself, you know?
Well, 100%. It's that feeling of, I earned this, that keeps you going when things get tough, which they will.
And that leads us to Mark's final takeaway, which I love: try something different. He's all about breaking the mold, even or maybe especially when it feels a little scary.
That's where the magic happens. Think about it. Art, science, business, you name it. It's the ones who are brave enough to go against the grain, to experiment, who end up changing the game.
And he actually gives this great example from his magic act. He chose to do a trick completely silently.
Silently. Now that's bold. I don't think I've ever seen a silent magic trick.
Right. Apparently, it's not very common in close-up magic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it made him super nervous, but can you imagine how much that must have captivated the audience? It's like you take away something familiar, the patter, the jokes, and suddenly everyone's even more on edge, trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
Such a clever way to play with expectations. It's like he was saying, hey, it's okay to be a little different, a little unexpected. Even if it doesn't land perfectly every time, you've learned something. Push your own creative boundaries.
Totally. And, you know, for me, that's the biggest takeaway from Mark's story. It's not really about magic at all, right? It's about finding something you're passionate about and being willing to put in the work to embrace the discomfort of learning and growing.
It's about looking at those things we might dismiss as ordinary, a hobby, a hidden talent, even a challenge we've been avoiding, and realizing they have the potential to be extraordinary. If we treat them with that same kind of curiosity, dedication, and yeah, maybe even a little magic, who knows what we could accomplish.
Absolutely. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from the most unexpected places. And hey, maybe there's a little magician in all of us. We just got to be willing to step into the spotlight.